This is UK housing. In the last 2 or 3 decades of geopolitical and technological chaos, one thing has remained a near constant. The older generation's ability to handle the younger generation's property frustrations with all the grace and empathy of Ted Bundy offering you a ride home. So this video is for you to show them the next time Gramps is talking some shit. In the 1980s, the average UK house price was 3 times the average UK salary. If that was today, a teacher on 35k should be able to afford a 3-bed semi. But you're a teacher, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
And what's your property situation?
Well, there's 6 of us living in a flat share, but my uncle owns it, so we get a reduced rate if I f*** him.
Anyway, since the 80s, successive governments, Labour and Tory, have failed to build housing because they wanted to attract the votes of the demographic who are most likely to go out and vote for them. And that, until very, very recently, was 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds. But that shortage of supply has created a demand, which has meant the average UK house price now is 7 times the average UK salary. And remember, that's just the average. That's UK house prices after they've been pulled down by areas of poverty and deprivation. Like, you could literally buy a house for 15 grand in Grimsby. But in the unlikely event that you don't want to live in Grimsby and you choose to follow socioeconomic trends and migrate nearer to the capital where the industry and the jobs are, the average cost of a house is 11 times the average UK salary. Now, your dad might say, well, yeah, it's not just you though, is it? You know, most people buy a house with someone. And it's like, yeah, that might be true now, but it wasn't true in the 70s and the 80s when you got on the ladder, was it? Like, why should young people have to shackle themselves to someone else? Why should younger generations now have to have less financial independence than you had 25 years ago? Second, if we're talking about a traditional man and wife buying a house in which to raise a family, well, if she's on an average UK salary, she won't be able to afford childcare, so she's going to drop out of the workforce to look after the baby and you'll be back to one income. Perhaps you're thinking, well, move where it's cheaper. Well, most people don't have access to remote working. Most people on average salaries are commuting into work every day. And if they did move to Middlesbrough or the arse end of Wales, salaries would go down and their house prices would be relative. Now, you might say, oh, you're just jealous. You know, if you work hard and make sacrifices, like, what about teachers and nurses and mechanics? Should they not be allowed to buy a flat? So they come up with this stuff like, if you work hard enough and sacrifice holidays, and it's obviously dog right? Because nurses work hard but stand dick one chance of getting on the ladder. And when it comes to sacrifice, that is an interesting one. Maybe stay in a little bit more. Like, if what you're trying to achieve is to save 15 grand to put towards a flat deposit, maybe now is not the right time to sign a BMW finance agreement. But when they come out with shit like, well, I didn't go out for 7 years and I saved hard and I didn't get any takeaways and I gave up my phone and I ignored my friends' texts when it was their birthdays and dinners and weddings and Christmas. Like, that is not normal. Do you think that sounds reasonable? You know, that something as fundamental as having a roof over your head is out of reach unless you put yourself under house arrest for a 7 stretch. Well, it weren't easy for me, but I tell you what I did. I stayed in and I ate mud and stinging nettles for 7 years. Like, I'm taking the piss a bit, but you hear that mentality wheeled out quite a lot. Something was hard for me, and I could look at maybe fixing it for you, but it would be more beneficial to my ego to stroke it and reframe it as though somehow it's some big character building thing. It's a sign that I toughed it out. Look, if you're advocating for the next generation to suffer the same hardship that you suffered because you've normalized it, you are actually traumatized. That is trauma. Because the normal human reaction to having suffered some sort of oppression or hardship would be to go, that was really not fun. I did not enjoy that. How can we fix that so that no one else has to go through that shit? Like, how can we progress from that? You know? Anyway, back to you. Boomers who bought property in the 90s and noughties were the biggest beneficiaries of those first seeds of the housing crisis. When your home doubled or tripled in value, and you got all that sweet, sweet equity, if you pan out from that a second, that was society pushing your children further and further away from any sense of financial security. And you might say, well, I've got my bungalow. When I die, I'll just bequeath that to my kids and then they'll get on the ladder. Well, probably not. you know, chances are you're going to need looking after. And your kids will be too busy working their 1 or 2 jobs, paying their astronomical private rent fees. I'm not even kidding. People are paying over the asking price for flats they haven't even viewed yet. So they won't have the time or the money to care for you, so you will have to sell your home. Now, I know some of this sounds blamey, but you must understand it's hard not to be a bit bitter because you guys made the yuppie money, you had 100% mortgages, you had social mobility, and you made a killing out the housing crisis. And whenever this subject gets raised, it always feels like it's the 70-year-old NIMBY Tory voters who get listened to first. Now, you might think a core component of the economy, like housing, might be something that the party of fiscal responsibility, the natural party of government, might be enthusiastic about fixing. But when the younger generations voice their concerns, like, can we please build some more houses? We obviously need 3 million more homes. Tories are always like, well, do we though? Do we? Because these NIMBYs over here don't want them. People in their 70s vote more than people in their 20s, and we like keeping the cost of property artificially high because it keeps the donors happy, most of whom happen to be property developers. Thanks for playing. The other one you might hear your dad come out with is blaming it on the EU. Way! Nice one, Dad. Yes, good to hear the greatest hits. Well, if we didn't have all those years of freedom of movement, we wouldn't have had all the immigrants who wouldn't have put pressure on the housing, would it? Right. Yeah. So it's not government failing spectacularly to build the amount of housing that we actually need in a growing country that then creates a synthetic bubble that you are the beneficiary of. It's just, bloody immigrants coming over here, taking all the houses. Like, I don't know how to say this in a way that is not insulting, so I'm just going to come out and say it. If you think Bulgarian cleaners and Romanian bar staff were coming over here and buying up the 3-bed and 4-bed family homes, if that's what you think the problem is, I think you might be happier in the fiction section of TikTok. Okay? Bye-bye now. Final thought for the boomers and for those who have benefited from the housing crisis. I'm sorry if this comes off as blamey or cynical or snarky. Honestly, I don't blame you. If I was in a position where I could make £100,000 from just holding the title deed and sitting back and letting government make me rich, I probably would do the same. But you have to know, this is a problem that's going to come knocking at your door too soon. And no amount of help to buy or 25% ownership or 4-person mortgages schemes are going to solve that. It is all kicking the can down the road, trying to synthesize the mechanism of buying a house, but without fixing any of the underlying issues. So either you'll be forced to sell your home to pay for your care and your kids will get nothing, or your kids will be forced to come back and live with you. I think you're just jealous. It's just politics of envy. Well, here's the kicker. Here's the final thought for you. I'm on the property ladder. I would probably benefit from a further restriction on house building, but I can see how bad this is going to get. We have to fix it.